Hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Higher Ground podcast. I have a very special guest with us today. You might notice some similarity in the last name. This is Robert Castriota, and Robert and I have known each other for, how old are you again?
Gosh,
since birth,
yeah.
I would say. So Robert is a director at NORD, which is a German investment bank focused on green energy and finance. But what I'd like to do is turn this over to you, and maybe if you could just give us a thumbnail sketch of your background and tell us a little about who you are and what your interests are.
Thanks. I'll start by saying, in a lot of ways that I introduce myself, I am Tom's son, Robert. I've been working full-time in New York City for about 6 years for NORD, as you mentioned, in the kind of clean energy finance space. Had a short stint in consulting prior, and then went to school in upstate New York at Binghamton University for my undergraduate degree.
Fantastic. What I'd like to do is do a little bit of, so the audience can get to know you. So we ask some this or that questions. Again, I could take some guesses at the answers, but I just feel like that might be cheating, So beer or wine? Beer. Okay. Very good.
Got that from you.
It's not too controversial. Yes. Yeah. We can go down a level. It's like IPA versus lager versus
exactly.
Maybe we'll skip out on that because I know my answer. How about summer or winter?
Winter.
I think I know the answer to this one next. Is a beach vacation or mountain vacation? Kind of goes with
mountains, for sure.
Yeah, mountain vibe. Are you more of a planned event person or spontaneously go?
It's more likely spontaneous. Yeah, to go with the flow is kind of nice.
Yeah. See what happens. Kind of play it by ear. Makes sense. Do you find yourself saying, "Ugh, I'm too hot," or "Ugh, I'm too cold"?
That's why I'm more of a winter guy. I much prefer the cold weather.
Got it. So you're too hot. Understood. Do you typically operate on logic or gut feel?
It's a good question. I mean, I think maybe, bouncing between the two, depending on the scenario.
Okay, good. And then books or movies?
It's tough. I probably watch more movies than read, but I do like a good book too.
Yes, that's for sure. I know you, and you've given me quite a few good recommendations. So I appreciate that. And then last question, which will transition into our work questions, which is, do you prefer to work alone or in a team?
Definitely a team. Yeah, I like the collaborative style.
So tell me, if you would, a bit about the kind of work you do at NORD.
So the team in New York, it's quite small. We're all based in New York City. We finance renewable energy projects for large developers in the U.S. So think about these massive solar arrays that can be 10 miles long in the middle of Texas and Arizona in the desert. We do large wind farms with 300-400 yard tall turbines, large fields of them as well. Most recently worked in a couple in upstate New York. What's becoming more popular now as well is they call them utility scale batteries, which help to smooth out the intermittent nature of renewable energy. So it acts as like a nice complement. When the sun is not shining, you might have a battery that's connected to the solar plant that you can discharge. It kind of makes the resource a little bit more firm. So predominantly that's, in the last 6 years, I've worked on those three types of projects. We do a little bit of traditional energy as well. So thermal, we do some pipelines, gas plants, and then we have a kind of separate infrastructure team that does everything from airports and toll roads to data centers, which I'm sure you're familiar at Google. It's a massive growing area now.
Yeah.
Every other deal is a data center pretty much.
Yeah, not always. Not local constituents aren't always thrilled about having a data center show up in their neighborhood. Tell me more about the battery, if you would mind. Do they typically co-locate them in the same space? Because even residential areas that I'm in now, or you'll see a big solar field next to a train station or off in the woods. Are the batteries located in a similar location?
It typically makes sense to, but it's not mutually exclusive. So it enhances the value of the resource. So if you put a battery with the solar project, there's more time during the day which you can generate electricity. So you can sell electric onto the grid. What I will say is there's also a lot of these plays where a developer puts a battery in a very constrained area on the grid on its own. So you can have a standalone battery as well, which plays on the arbitrage between power prices. So you charge when the sun is shining during the day on the grid, on grids that have a lot of solar. It'll push the power prices down. And then you can discharge like in the evening when everyone goes home from work and turns their air conditioners on and runs the wash and their lights and stuff. So you can kind of anticipate these things. There's a lot of market-led products and stuff to create more stability on the grid. So there's like other ways you can make money. But yeah, I would say both co-locating the battery with the solar and having the battery separate have different kind of value propositions.
And there's a fair bit of concern you hear from people like with renewable energy things. The wind's not blowing, so we're not generating electricity, or it's dark and therefore my lights are going to go out. I mean, is any of that fear accurate?
Well, I would say across the US, it's still predominantly natural gas, I think is still kind of like the largest resource. There's still coal in the grid, but renewables are growing very quickly. And I will say in certain markets, California, for example, it's more than 30% of the electricity generated there comes from renewable energy. So, and there's European countries like Denmark, for example, and South America as well, like where it's almost 100% renewable energy. And so it has been tested, maybe not at the scale of the size of the United States, but it can work with proper planning. The big thing as well that is also neglected is transmission lines. And it's very important that you have an overbuild of transmission lines and like sort of smart design on where they run. Because a lot of times the resource is like, it's really sunny, again, like bring up like Arizona and Texas, California. But there's a lot of parts of the country. You want to move the energy from where the resource is to the load centers. So if you have enough transmission lines to move the energy, you can take advantage of that.
So that's interesting. So the transmission lines themselves are the bigger constraint than potentially the fact that it's dark.
And it should theoretically be bipartisan, right? Because transmission lines move all electrons, renewable combustion, and
that's fair.
Really anything. So yeah, it's just smart grid planning, and it saves people money on their bills.
Our grid is quite old, right? So have we seen any major projects trying to upgrade the grid in geographies?
There are large projects that are getting financed and built. They're just extremely difficult because of the way that we regulate electricity in the US. So if you build a transmission line across state lines, it becomes FERC regulated, which creates a lot more effort that has to be done from a permitting process.
I see.
And I think there's an argument to be had around, the push and pull between individual landowners versus the greater good, reducing everyone's power bills and stuff like this, and like creating a more strong, resilient grid. The way it is now, again, I come from more on the developer side. So I'm biased towards that, I would say a little bit. The issue is if someone doesn't want a transmission line on their farm, for example, they can appeal it and essentially say no, almost no matter what. And so sometimes you see the designs of these transmission lines and they literally like zigzag like this because you have to add like miles extra to the line just because of the difficulty around getting people to sign off on it.
Interesting.
So and then I think maybe China does too much the other way where they don't, there's not really much regard at all. And that's also wrong, but there's got to be
a middle ground.
It's kind of a really necessary thing right now with all the energy demand that you really need to be able to build these projects faster.
Yeah, I can't agree more. And you said, I like your position of that. It's bipartisan. We all need energy.
Should be.
You're red or blue, right? Should be. Yeah, exactly. That's interesting. Do you see any particular legislation coming up now that's helping or harming in the expansion of let's leave out the renewable side and just the transmission end of the transmission perspective?
To be honest, I haven't been as close to like what's happening right now.
Do you finance? Does NORD finance the transmission line generation, or is it they do? Okay,
we do, yeah.
If we can shift back to maybe your journey, your career journey for folks who are interested in upping their game or changing careers or growing. Your first entrance into the professional workspace post-college was Protiviti. I know you're doing compliance consulting at the time, and then you moved into, structured finance. Was there any particular benefits you got from the consulting world or from risk or that to to help you get to where you are today in terms of your thinking or planning or process?
Yeah, I'm definitely grateful for the time I spent in consulting. It consulting, at least at the time, like I know things have changed a lot in the last almost 10 years since I've been out, but it helped polish me a little bit more, like from a professionalism perspective, post college, where immediately I'm in meetings with clients, and I'm billing, so they're paying me to help them with a problem. And so there's a level of like immediately you need to show up and act a certain appropriate way, instill trust. And honestly, especially when you're at the beginning of your career and you're dealing with new problems, it's just being honest and saying, I don't have the answer for you. Can you help explain it? And I'll come back and I'll get you the answer. I'll get you the right person that you need to talk to. So that on more of like the softer side was probably the most helpful part. Transitioning into structured finance and renewable energy, I worked on a few projects through like a lender due diligence lens. So we would go into a Fortune 500 company and we would go in on behalf of the bank that lends that company money and check that they're reporting certain credit metrics properly. So it did allow me to get familiarity with like generally how loans work, credit agreements work, understanding structuring on corporate loans a little bit. So there was a nice soft entrance into it, which was a comfortable way to learn.
Comfortable way to get in.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember my argument to you, I think at the time, but also just in general to some of the coaching and mentoring that I've done, is you get more experience doing consulting in a variety of ways. Like you said, the client facing skill set, but compared to a traditional employee, at least for the first few years in your career, you're doing so much work across so many projects as a consultant that your experience level just skyrockets. That's one of the positives. The negatives are, I distinctly remember the travel.
Yeah. I agree with you that the sector stuff was helpful because I was doing a oil company to an industrials company to it was a private jet company, right? And then worked in hospitality a little bit. There was an energy company, right? So it was helpful we weren't getting super deep into the way the business operates, but you do see like the differences in loan terms and stuff, which I thought was kind of interesting. And the travel was great. It just was too frequent, I think was the problem. It had the variety, like every week I was going somewhere different, which was really cool. But I was paying for an expensive apartment in New York City and didn't really feel like I was getting much use out of it. Just difficult.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I distinctly remember because I entered consulting, as you know, later in my career. And for me, it was the travel was fun at first and then it became exhausting.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's not for everyone. So I know you did the program at Yale, the Yale Center for Business and Environment. Did you find that coursework valuable from a content perspective, from networking level? What do you feel you got out of that course?
Yeah, I did the financing and deploying clean energy certificate. It was kind of the perfect amount of time that I would put towards the coursework. It was a year program, 5 to 10 hours a week of, between pre-recorded lectures. Every week there was one lecture from a professor where you could ask questions. There was office hours as well. And then you'd get assignments and there was modules to work through. So it was the right amount of, workload that like I could still go to work. And then, at night, almost sometimes look forward to it, or the weekends I have to catch up. It was a helpful time in my career to do it because right when I started working, right when I transitioned from the syndications desk, which is more of a sales role, to originations, which I've been doing for the last 4 or 5 years, is more technical. And so having the additional like coursework from the Yale program helped on the technical side. I spent 10 weeks doing financial modeling with the program, which was directly, there were some days, it was the coolest thing. I would literally, it would be teaching you how to do debt sizing in the program for the exact loans that I was actually doing debt sizing for at work. So I was like jumping back and forth between my coursework to actually applying it, which is quite unique. Like I feel like it's very rare to get the opportunity to do that.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Can you just help our listeners understand the difference between syndication and origination?
Origination is the client-facing front office role where you build relationships with clients and you structure deals for them. So you put together the debt package for a solar project. That's your responsibility. You have a team of people who due diligence the asset, you do the financial modeling, you negotiate the legal docs, and ultimately you close the deal. The syndication side comes in, during that process and then also afterwards. So if the solar project is massive, which like projects are growing a lot in the US, just like trend wise for a lot of reasons over the last few years, where a bank like NORD, that's like a mid-sized bank, doesn't have the balance sheet to support, a deal of a certain size, say like, we're not comfortable above $75 million of loan, but because of the size of the deal, we need to take a larger position, maybe twice as big, maybe 150 million.
Mm-hmm.
The syndication team comes in and takes the $75 million loan that we're not comfortable with and finds another bank who wants exposure to a renewable energy project, who wants to make the returns that we're making from the loan on interest and fees. And we syndicate that portion of the loan to them. So the syndicators are also managing relationships, but their clients, I would say, are the banks that they actually sell the paper to.
I see. No, that's great. Thank you for explaining that. I distinctly remember when you started on the syndications, and it was a very different role than you're in now. This is originations much more, like you said, it's more. Is it more akin to like when you think of traditional sort of large scale sales, where you're positioning why you should do this and helping them understand the value proposition and the returns, things like that? Is that?
That's right. But what's nice and kind of unique about this space is it really merges the salesmanship you're talking about with the technical understanding of the asset.
I see.
We read through like 100-page independent engineering reports that are put together to review all of the equipment, the land, the permitting, how it connects to the grid, the construction timeline, who's buying the power at what price, what are the risks behind that. So it's not just saying we're convincing this company to buy a product from us or to work with us. It's making sure us as the lender we're actually comfortable with the asset itself.
Interesting. So it's got an interesting twist. It's not only are you partnering on a solution that you both benefit from, you're also doing the diligence of making sure that the party you're engaging with is risk worthy, for lack of a better term, or the project is risk worthy.
And it's a kind of a cool.
Interesting.
The reason I really like the job is because you never know what you're going to be doing that day. Like some days it's just reading the engineering report the whole day and asking questions to the consultant and getting on the phone with the client and encouraging them to make a better decision around how much risk they want to take, using a more experienced counterparty versus a newer one that's cheaper or something or promising more.
Yeah.
And we obviously as, risk-minded folks are pushing them towards the more conservative approach. So some days are like that. And then other days are flying out to wherever to pitch a deal to a client and, putting together a pitch deck and or taking them out to dinner and doing the kind of like more salesy
activities
oriented kind of component.
Interesting.
So it always keeps things interesting that there's not a lot of monotony.
Yeah. What are some of the more interesting risks that you've uncovered as part of engineering due diligence? Nothing non-public. I mean, like I distinctly remember you mentioning a few cases like environmental impact or some of those odd cases that have come up that have been a proverbial wrench in the works.
Yeah, I think with wind projects, and I think this is overblown generally.
Is there a pun hiding in there? Is that an attempt at?
Sometimes it can be as simple as a permit is missing. I mean, maybe that's not the most fun example, but can just create, you could have a $150 million deal, like one specifically I'm thinking about that we worked on recently that got derailed for almost a month because there was missing a county permit. And
a $15 filing fee kind of thing?
I spent, probably 20 hours on the phone with local counsel who understands at the county level how this process works, negotiating with the client's local counsel who was saying this is totally fine. There's no risk here. And my counsel saying like, we wouldn't advise you closing the deal until you fix this.
Wow.
I'm trying to navigate such an arcane process and situation as someone who's like not a subject matter expert and needs to rely on my counsel.
I see.
Yeah, it gets, and obviously the client just wants their money. So they're like,
go figure.
Just,
we want to get started building this project.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And you're like, but there's a
I
clerk
can't.
in such and such county in the middle of, your project that's saying you can't. Yeah, that's interesting. So, you more recently, thinking late last year about, it started about almost a year ago. You took a temporary assignment in the London office. And I'd just be curious how that experience was. How did you go about making a rotation happen? There's so many details. Orchestrating these things can be very tricky, obviously, and making that happen, especially for a long duration like a 6-month run. Leaving out the whole surprises one finds with T-Mobile phone contracts and leaving the country. We'll save that for another podcast.
Yeah, it might not be relevant for higher ground, but
no, it's not.
definitely
Yeah, but I'd love to hear more
took
about
some
that.
hours off of my life, for sure, as yours and
Yes.
our good friend Brian as well.
Yes. But anyway, but we digress.
Yeah, check your phone plan if you're going to move abroad. That's
the key takeaway from that. One takeaway, not the key takeaway.
That's the key. I have always wanted to work abroad, targeted London specifically because we have a branch there, and wanted to stay at the same company. It was helpful that it's English speaking, right? So you can just plug right in. You don't need to necessarily it's a higher bar if I think you go to a country that is predominantly doing business in a different language, like Latin America, for example.
Sure.
So that was, I think, why I wanted to do that, mostly for the experience of understanding how to work in a different environment. European business culture is different for sure, especially London business culture is different than New York.
How so?
I think there is, and it's a little bit more conservative, traditional in Europe, in a way that New York, I think, has modernized a lot post 08, especially I'm speaking from the finance banking sector. It's more formal in the way that you talk to clients. You're thinking about your words maybe a little bit more. It's a little bit less frank. The deals take a lot longer. I think there's a sense of there's a little bit more time that you can take to figure things out versus, and maybe it's just my own experience, but in New York, it's how quickly can we do this? I'm not visiting my clients a lot in New York just because it's efficiency. Why would we do that? We can just get on the phone. There's more personal kind of connection in Europe, I would say, as well. I flew out to Italy to meet with clients, France, and it's quite commonplace for many members on that team to do that every other week.
You're building it's more relationship building in person versus a little more transaction. Not transaction is probably not fair, but a little more.
I think that is
Is it fair? Okay.
And I think what's helpful, and what I would say for anyone who's thinking about doing it, is you can take things from that environment and bring them back. And I think that's some way how you can stand out, because humans, I think, are still humans, and it's people enjoy and appreciate having a connection with the person that they're going to be spending a lot of. When you're doing these deals, you're spending a lot of time with a very few amount of people getting it done. And so I think that's definitely a valuable thing that you can take from something like that.
That's great. How did you make it happen? Is it, because I can imagine it's not, unless was there a regular program that's done, it's like a rotation type program, or is this something you did as a one-off?
No, and I mean, ideally there is at a larger company where you can just sort of apply and get accepted. Yeah. It took me a couple of years of just sort of every once in a while bringing it up with my manager that I was interested. I had a few opportunities to go to the London and, our head office in Germany. And so I networked with a lot of people, thought being if they know me and then the request gets put out, that they would, feel comfortable doing this just because you were able to make a good impression. So I think part of it is a little bit around, trying to get to know as many people as possible. And then there was, I don't know if this is my organization, but I think generally everything in work is a little bit of a negotiation. And I wanted to go for longer. I wanted to go for maybe a year or so. I think my manager came back with a month was his first proposal. And then we went back and forth. Well, yeah. So I don't know if my recommendation is to start high and know that they'll pull you back. I think we found reasons for me to go over that made sense, but it was also a perk, a little bit of a soft perk at the organization for putting my time in and getting the opportunity to do that.
I also think it ends up being an investment in the employee. We often forget the fact that this kind of experience further cements you into the organization and helps you, like you said, expand your network, but also it's an investment in you. So now you have a good read in other markets. You've got contacts around the globe. These are things that are of larger benefit to the organization. I think that could help in the pitch, at least in hindsight, maybe. But that's great. So it sounds like, again, overall a positive experience. And if one can make it happen in their organization, they should give it a shot.
I think it's good to have the relationship with your manager where they want to help you out for that point to try and keep you at the company longer. So that's a key piece. But then also there's going to be a lot of people in the organization that need to sign off on it. So you do need to find a business pertinent reason to go, or at least build enough of a story to explain like the benefits. And so for me, I was the only person that's ever been from New York and worked in London on a longer term, medium term kind of stint like that. And so there was a lot of lessons learned just between the teams who don't communicate that often that I could explain. Oh, we actually do this differently in New York. Here's how you do this thing. We manage the team differently. These two teams interact differently, which is interesting, right? You can kind of like think about best practice. And then also coming back, like at the end of it, I had a bunch of meetings with our management around lessons learned, some things that I complimented the team and said, look, you're doing a much better job in this area. This is where we kind of stand out. So if you wrap that into the whole story, and then I think have a strong relationship, part of it is just working for an organization that appreciates you too. Then, you can kind of make those things happen.
Oh, that's fantastic. So maybe we could shift gears to something our audience has expressed interest over the years in the interviewing process. You've been through a couple of different flavors of interviews. Maybe we could talk a little bit about some of your best, worst, funniest interviews, perhaps. Anything come to mind?
Yeah, definitely. The one I like is I feel like a lot of people, if you've been out and interviewed for a while, have come across this scenario where you're excited about a job. You get your resume past the initial screening, you speak to a recruiter, and then maybe have an in-person interview or two. So you get far enough in where you're feeling like you could actually land this opportunity. I had an experience like that at a different bank a few years ago and got, I think, near the final round. And then it went radio silent for probably about a month, maybe a little longer. It felt like a long time.
Yeah, I'm sure.
And yeah, of course, right. It's just, when you want something too. And then all of a sudden I got a call from the recruiter. Hey, they want to speak with you again. I said, this is wonderful. So we want to get you in right away. So I went in almost the next day. And, I interviewed for one specific job. It was an originations job. And then I noticed on the invitation, I was not speaking with an originator. I was speaking with a syndicator. And she was, I found out in the interview, she was the head of syndications for the team. And the entire conversation for the first probably almost 20 minutes was about what she was doing in syndications and asking me questions about my experience in syndications. And the red flag in my head was like, this is not the right and I eventually and very respectfully stopped her and was like, I just want to be clear. I was interviewing for this role. I was for an originations role. And it seems like this is not really an interview. This is more of an interview for syndications. There's nothing you can do about those situations. It's good. I believe it's good to be respectful regardless. Never like, why close a door on anything? The woman asked me, oh, yes, it is. I saw this was on your resume as well. Would this be something you'd be interested in? And for me, especially in that kind of scenario, without having time to think about it in real time, I always just like to be like, oh yeah, like I could always consider it. I thought it was for something different, or to being honest. Let's keep talking about it. I'm here, right? So
yeah, we both committed to the time, so let's go.
Yeah, exactly. I knew quickly afterwards this wasn't what I was looking for. I responded in the next couple of days that this, thank you, but wasn't looking for this type of role. I think people can sometimes, it's not an ego thing, but it's like, don't waste my time, which is quite reasonable, I think, but it's going to happen. Like I kind of take that view that like, just because, they shouldn't do that, like it doesn't mean they're not going to do that. And then you can decide in the moment how you want to try to handle it.
Sure. I like your approach of the respectful, and that makes me happy on several levels. But I think the other opportunity that continuing to listen creates, if there is someone in your network that you could refer to the interviewer, or you can say, this isn't a great fit for me, but I can recommend you to this recruiter or to this candidate or something, so that you may not in the moment be for you, but it might be able to, you might be able to help her, the interviewer, in another capacity, rather than just being like, hey, not interested, have a nice day. I think it's that, you get more you get more, what's the word I want to use? I was going to say flies with honey, but that makes no sense in this example.
No, but I think that was a missed opportunity on my part, to be honest, because that you build the relationship with whoever you refer, and then the interviewer also looks at you as someone who's well connected, and might reconsider you for something you're more interested down the road, or if your industry is quite small, like this very specific niche that I'm in is, it's never worth, in my opinion, it's really never worth burning any bridges with people. You never know how you're going to have to interact with them in the future.
Yeah. Yeah. And saying I'm not interested is not really, in my opinion, it's not really burning a bridge. You're being upfront and you're being honest. It's just, there's positive, negative, and neutral. Doing that is neutral, right? Negative. You could have handled it negatively, which it sounds like that's not a good thing. But maybe taking the longer term view might have been helpful. Interesting. Yeah, I'm curious. What advice would you give to candidates today? Because it's tough. It's tough out there. I mean, we're finally starting to hear some jobs numbers. This last month, it's up a lot. But what would you say to someone who's just getting started? How should they think about persisting in a lot of these cases where it's hard to find something or to even get the call back?
It's really difficult right now in finance, specifically from my experience. I'm working with like a few like younger men who are late in college or post college and looking to pivot into finance, and the jobs just are few and far between. And I've since I was in their shoes, it has just gotten so much more competitive. So the first thing I would say is definitely give yourself grace, because it's a different environment than, you might get advice from people who are ahead of you that are, come on, you just got to keep working and
buckle up.
You can get, it's yes, but it's much harder now. So knowing that also going into it keeps your expectations at the right level. I'm not an expert in how to optimize your resume to get picked up properly by AI. I think there's a lot of, it's almost a requirement now that you need to spend the time researching how to do that properly.
My counsel is find a recruiter that focuses either in your area, and sometimes the reputable ones will help you as part of their experience. Other people you might have to pay. So again, I always go back to the same thing of if you're not a pro at this, and most of us aren't, especially when we're starting out our careers, get lots of advice. Have somebody look over your CV. Make sure you've got other eyes on it than your own, and your immediate family. I love the fact that, hey, grandma understands what I do by my resume. That's awesome, right? If you can explain it, then that means it's simple, which is good that they're not in space, right? But the flip side of that is, you're not tailoring it, and it may not be as effective as you like. So sometimes that requires some investment. I can say my first cuts of my resume were rough. Thankfully, knock on wood, I haven't had to update it in a while. So I'm happy about that part, but it's definitely worth some investment. It's worth socializing. The other thing too, I don't know if you're doing with some of the folks you're working with, but practice the interviews. Go through and really get a good perspective on what are you doing well, what are you doing not so well from friends that will be honest with you. If the answer you're getting is, no, that was great, you don't need to change a thing, probably find somebody else. You want to find somebody else.
Push some more.
We'll push them for concrete change. Yeah, agreed. Totally agree with that. Go ahead, please.
No. I was going to say, I think LinkedIn can be a tool as well. It's definitely also becoming saturated in the way that I think everyone kind of realizes that they need to use this. When I was in college, I could reach out to somebody at the company that I was applying to, try and set up a coffee chat or something and get them on the phone and give them my pitch a little bit. And then maybe they went to your university, right? You could find those commonalities, build a little bit of a relationship, and potentially even ask for a referral, or at least get some advice on what the job is, so you know how to speak to it better in the interview. Just the more knowledge you can get. I think the issue, and I spoke to a friend of mine who's been hiring a lot in private equity. Everyone's doing that now. It's everyone's doing that. So it's used to be something you could do to stand out. I think now it's a requirement.
Table stakes,
to get your foot in the door, which is unfortunate, I would say. So what can you do? If you are able to get on the phone, you should be well practiced, to your point. I think really emphasizing your willingness and ability to work really hard and trying to find concrete examples of adversity that you've overcome. I think it feels like it can be overdone. Everyone's going to say they want to work hard. If I'm hiring for a role, I really want to hear that someone's willing to put the work in, because the learning curves a lot when you're out of college are pretty steep. So you want to convince the team that you're going to be jumping onto that this is a priority for you, and you are going to figure it out.
I love that, especially because The opportunity today to try new things without a huge capital investment up front the opportunity is just so much greater. So your full-time job should be finding a full-time job, with the running joke, right? When you're looking for that. But there's downtime that you need to take for yourself, for your mental health, and for your the grace. You said, I love that example. But the other thing is, you've got this time. What are you doing with it? Are you volunteering? Are you building a piece of software with AI help, or if you're doing a project in your community, or that's another way to highlight that you're able to, what's the word I want to use, develop something, work hard, produce something, and demonstrate the fact that you're using that time well and effectively. And it also gives you talking points. I've done a few things for fun. In fact, you're on one right now.
Yeah.
But the creating something and doing something to talk about on your experiences is very, I believe, is very powerful.
And that adds credibility when you don't have real work experience, because you can say you know how to do X, Y, and Z thing. When I was interviewing for the syndications role at NORD, like my first full-time job, in the first round interview, when I was speaking to the head of the team, he mentioned that one of the big things he wants to do with the role is have someone more involved in Bloomberg and have a better understanding of how to use the terminal. And we knew that we were going to be speaking a week later. Within that week, I found a 10-hour Bloomberg free online training that they put together, which was interactive and showed you some shortcuts in the terminal and gave me some things to reference in the interview. And I showed up and was like, by the way, like, you make a call back to, I know that this is a priority for you. I don't have the job, but I want you to know that this is super serious for me. I went and did this anyway.
Yeah.
And I learned these things, and I found how it can apply to power or whatever sector you're looking at.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, that's great
advice.
That
kind of stuff will, if another candidate doesn't do that, who are they going to pick? Okay, their GPA was a little bit high. I think once you can sort of show that you're not just a CV with like specific metrics and stuff from college, and that you're willing to like take the extra step. Yeah. That's what I think, that's the human piece of it, that people will be like, I want this guy, or I want this woman.
Yeah, it's concrete. You can connect to it. It demonstrates the hard work you're doing and the willingness to invest in the job even before you get the job. So I think that's really good advice. Yeah. The other bit that I've talked about more than once, in fact, it's a common theme across the show, is networking. One of my guests, relatively fresh out of school, I met him at a Marist reunion for me. And I won't say what number it was, but we were all like, we don't need to know. Yeah, it was definitely slightly higher than 5, slightly lower than 50. Yeah, not quite there. But we were at an event, and it was, I think it was at a bar, but it was a get together with alumni, and everyone's welcome. When he just went to this, he's like, put out his hand. Hey, hi, I'm Kai, and I'd like to introduce myself. And I was like, that was great. And reached out to me on LinkedIn a couple of months after he graduated, said, hey, I think that's something you can do to make that human connection. I didn't help him get a job, but he's now in my network. And if things cannot present themselves, he can benefit from, or vice versa. That's now become part of the wider net. He was the only one, by the way, who did that. And there were a lot of freshies there that were
stands out
there, but he stood out. Yeah, definitely stood out. So that was a positive. One thing I'd like to talk about is your first interview experience. If you're comfortable going back to that one at NORD, you want to talk about that one, or?
Yeah, for sure. I think, that situation, I think it emphasizes sometimes you need to act boldly with work and take some chances and just kind of make considerations around just thinking about things logically. But so I think in that situation, I had interned at NORD for 3 months. Summer of 2017, after my sophomore year of college. And then I was studying abroad the following spring in Barcelona. And I reached out, like at the end of the internship, it went really well. And I asked if I could come back the next summer and work with the team again. Everyone agreed. In the meantime, I was able to actually secure an internship at Protiviti, which was the consulting company I worked at after college. But I had about a 6-week gap before the Protiviti internship started. And I really liked what I was doing at NORD. I liked the space a lot. So I kept in touch with the team and, had verbal agreement to come back from the head of the team. He was like extremely busy all the time. And so I was like thrilled that I was able to kind of track him down and get a commitment there. And he had told me, just reach out to HR, they'll get it set up for you. And I did, and HR had a policy, and it was a very clear cut policy that we don't do internships less than 10 weeks. And, it's probably like February or March, prior to the summer internship. I was like, oh, I have agreement though from the head of the team. Like he said, it's fine. And I CC'd him. And then I stopped hearing. And I didn't hear a word from anyone, like the head of the team, from HR. And this went on for, I reach out every few weeks, trying to be like, you have to maintain a level of, you can't hound them.
You can't be,
then you become that guy, and you don't.
Persistence versus annoying. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very gray finding the right equilibrium there. But
it's true.
Ultimately, I had to make a decision whether or not I was going to stay in Europe for the summer. I had some friends traveling around, and then come back 6 weeks later. But I was really compelled to try and work at this company, so I came back without the job. And I think you, Dad, were actually the one who gave me the advice to, you can't track them down. You know that they liked you. You know that you did a good job. Why not just happen to be in the area of the office, and we can have a friend come down and let you up, and then you can just go ask them directly and see if there's a reason why you weren't able to get in contact with them. And that's why I said at the beginning, I was like, no way I'm doing that. It's like, this is.
I distinctly remember the conversation about, look, sometimes you got to get out of your comfort zone, and I often ask myself this question: what's the worst thing that can happen? Right.
Well, that's it. It's taking a bit of a pragmatic approach, being comfortable with discomfort, and saying, what is the worst thing that's going to happen? They already kind of weren't responding. So I don't have anything. So I'm starting from zero. If this doesn't go well, I'm not getting taken out in handcuffs. Maybe that's the worst thing that happens. Technically, it could, but
you really, are in control of preventing that.
Well, you did sneak into an office, but yes, I agree.
But you were escorted out. That's not fair. Yeah, you were a guest.
And yeah, I mean, it worked out extremely well. I ended up getting the job. I bumped into my boss. I think it's important to be respectful in those situations. Hey, totally. I was in the area. I was seeing a friend, and he said, if you want to see the team, come on up, and you have a second to talk. And I think there was a lot of respect that I think, he had for me to just say, this is important enough for me to just show up and see what can, take the chance a little bit. And then while I was there, they were able to unstick the issue with HR and ended up interning. What I would say is, if I didn't do that, I probably wouldn't have been able to maintain the relationship that ultimately led me coming back. So I do view that as kind of like a crucial step in my career. So it is valuable, to your point, Dad, just being pragmatic and thinking about what's the worst thing that could happen when you make a bold decision, and sometimes weighing that risk and saying or discomfort and saying it's worth it.
Yeah. And I know, again, in this role, I was your dad. I still am. But the opportunity to talk to someone with experience to say, hey,
exactly.
What mentor, can I do to unblock this, mentor or friend or someone who's been, then you can figure out what the opportunities could be. And then maybe it's the most uncomfortable one, maybe not, but it's at least this way you're giving it a go of, you're not saying, shucks, the world's mean and I didn't get a chance. You went up swinging, and worst case, you get hit with the ball. All right. Not the end of the world. But in this case, it worked out. So, yeah, I do think that was the right call. And you did the hard work. I'm only kidding. You did the hard work.
I give you
I just had the idea.
That's a good thing about having a good mentor. I wouldn't have even had that idea. And I do like to say, it's in life, it's either when you do something, it goes well, and then you're happy that it went well. Or if not, it's a good story.
Yeah. Worst case, I was escorted out in handcuffs.
Sure. Depending on the level of risk you're taking, which, that's why it's good to have some people around you advising you.
Yeah, giving advice on here's what you should do and don't do this. Yeah, exactly.
This is not me condoning, committing fraud or.
Yes. Or, listen, I didn't get the job, but I got his watch.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Wait, what did you do? No,
that'll show him.
That'll teach him. Yeah, no, that's great. Well, I appreciate you taking the time out. Should we give the folks just one last glimpse into that same story? Was it that same story, or if it was the other one where I was questioning your choice of dress for the drive-in? Do you remember that one?
It's actually all the funny interview stories come from NORD. That was
you've had quite a few good ones, honestly, in other places.
It's a perfectly supporting. It complements the other story perfectly. This happened my first interview, so the summer before. I forget this. You were driving me to the interview and you looked over at me and I had a jacket on, but I had no tie. And you were like, "Where's your tie?" And you were like, "Where's your tie?"
It's finance. It's finance, dude. Where's your
like,
tie?
I don't have a tie. It's a European bank. They don't wear tie. This is the European look. And I thought your look was like just pure, just like
Uh,
you idiot. Like,
Moi?
you stupid kid. No, and we're like, all right, it's fine. We're 25 minutes early, 30 minutes early. We'll go find a
Yeah.
place to get you a tie. And
Yeah.
we're
Well,
walking around Manhattan. And
it's near Times Square, Bryant Park. We'll
J.
find
Crew,
something.
like
Yeah, something will
something.
be open.
But I think you and me quickly realized it was
Nothing's
8:30 in the
open.
morning and nothing was open.
Nothing's open.
And you want to explain what you did?
Yeah, this was I have to say this was we're walking cars parked, we're walking down the street and I'm how do I solve this problem? I need a tie. At this point, I don't care if it matches or not. I need a tie. So we're walking down the street and then it hits me. And I remember I didn't tell you, so you could share your perspective of this. So I walk across the street to, I forget which hotel, Sheraton or one of the hotels that's right on the street. And the doorman's outside and I'm talking to the doorman. And what did you think what was going through your head as I did this?
Yeah, you just kind of crossed the street.
I didn't even say anything. Like, hang on. I was like, hang on, stay here. I'll be right back. So I go over, I walk over to the dude. And again, this comes down to you got nothing to lose, nothing ventured, nothing gained. And I asked this young man if I could borrow his tie for a couple of hours. And I promise I'll bring it back. And naturally, the question was insane. And he's for what? I'm like, you see that young man over there who's got a job interview? He forgot his tie at home. And he looks at his tie, he's like, takes it off. He's like, absolutely.
Like nothing.
Like nothing. He's like, yeah, no problem. So this is when people say New Yorkers are mean or not helpful. I say baloney. You can find, if you're nice, people will be nice. And if you ask for help, generally speaking, people will help you. Agreed. So long story short, you got
the tie, put it on, got the job. I remember we brought it back. He was like, how'd it go? He felt like he was involved in the whole thing.
Oh, he was invested. He was definitely invested. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, that was a fun story. Again, these are the things we remember. It's always good to have the fun stories. So I want to say, first of all, thank you for taking time out. I know you got a million things going on, even on the weekends, but if you could offer some advice to your younger self, and I know it's, you're not like, you don't have nearly as much. I actually have no gray. Never mind. If you would offer advice to your younger self or to a younger person.
It's just the lighting.
Just the light. Is that what it is? That's perfect. Good answer.
Coming in. No,
my question would be, staying off the hair thing, okay? Because I like the way I look better from the front than the back. I did bring it up. It's true. I did bring it up. What advice would you offer to yourself or a younger Robert now, knowing what you know?
You just can't underestimate or underemphasize the importance of building relationships with people. And I think you never know where something's going to lead. And I would say boldness. Like, honestly, what we spoke about with those two examples, those are, I think, perfect things you can apply and say, that's a crazy idea to ask a guy at a hotel for a tie. But if, people will be more helpful than you think. And whatever, catastrophizing you're doing in your head and saying like, I could never do this. This is uncomfortable. This is embarrassing. If you really sit and think about it long enough and try and come up with the worst case scenario, it's often not nearly as bad as you think. And that scenario is probably not going to happen either.
Yeah. I knew the worst that gentleman would say is no, or in classic New York fashion, we get the blank out of here.
Yeah. Something you can't say in the podcast.
Right? I can, but I choose to sometimes, but I generally not. Yeah. But no, that's good. That's good advice. Thank you. Well, thank you again for joining us today. And
thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's been my pleasure as always. Look forward to our next exploration of a new restaurant in Manhattan.
I can't wait either. Thanks for having me on.
Cheers. Thanks, Rob. Hi, everyone. I'm Tom Castriota, and welcome back to the Higher Ground podcast. Whether you're grinding through yet another job application, navigating a tough work environment, or just trying to level up your career, you've found your show. Each episode, I sit down with guests ranging from the C-suite to folks just starting out in their career for honest, unfiltered conversations about interviewing, managing, and everything in between. No corporate spin, no polished PR answers, just real conversations, real stories from people who've been there. This is season 2, and I'm so glad you're here for it. A quick note, all opinions are our own and don't represent any current or past employers. And if this sounds like your kind of show, then please hit like and subscribe. And once again, thank you for joining us.